Time and time again, I see people asking what material is best for the splitter, how to make a splitter. In this video, I'm going to answer all of your questions. Stay tuned. That's a good one. Right, for those of you who follow my channel and are subscribed, thank you guys. You probably seen those videos before. This is mainly for the newcomers, or even if you want to see a different way of making stuff. Team Prone Racing. We all know Nick, amazing guy, crazy car. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a oopsie. The old splitter that I made him about 2 years ago, in his words, not mine.
His words.
It's the best thing ever on the car. It was basically indestructible. He's been in a wall, he's been off, and it survived really well. And he's honestly convinced that it actually saved a lot of extra damage that could have happened to his car on this occasion. So we're gonna make a new one, naturally, because the old one, even though it could have been fixed, but it's just easier and better practice to make a new one, and cost-wise it would have been almost the same amount of money to repair the old one. It was quite a bit damaged. Anyways, Nick provided me with a template. That's another question I get asked from people. How do I send you a template? This is one way of doing it. This is plywood, because it's easy to make it on the car. It doesn't flop like cardboard, so you can make it from 5 mil, 6 mil, whatever plywood you have. Make a full template. I have all the mounting holes, I have all the writing which side, and then look what he's done. He basically cut it into 4 parts, so this is like a jigsaw puzzle. So it's easier to ship, so it's cheaper, and then it literally just arrived as is, so I can actually make a template. So I already marked everything that I need from this template. We're going to be using 10 mil infusion foam, the usual one, the one that has holes and grooves on the other side. First step of the process is obviously you trace from your template onto the foam, because foam becomes the main reinforcement part. This is the one that you cover all of your lovely materials in. So because the template is bigger than the sheet of foam, we're gonna cut the main part that you really want to be in one part, in one piece. So I'm gonna cut it first, and then I'm gonna use these pieces that are left over for a little bottom bit, because the bottom bit is not as important, it's not the structural bit. It's just basically the extension. It keeps the airflow nice and smooth underneath. So it's not as structural as the front bit, because obviously the front has all the mounting points. So you really want it to be, in ideal world, in one part. So let's trim this first, and then I'll show you another little thing that I'm going to be doing with this. I have done it before. I don't think I've made a video, and I think some of you will actually like it. I found that cutting this foam is easiest with a jigsaw, and just use a really fine blade. And another top tip, disable your force feed, whatever you don't want it to sort of push, and it gives you a really nice clean edge. Cut the whole thing and then you sand it. Now that the main part has been cut, I'm putting the template back onto the foam, just to double check that we are correct with everything we've just done, and it seems to be absolutely fine. But also I need this part needs to be measured and cut as well. Another little tip, as you can probably see, this one doesn't have any markings, this one has all the markings. So this is the top part, so this is the part that is facing up. So this is the visual part. The visual part is a reverse when we infusion mold, because obviously we have this lovely surface. So I have to make it backwards, because otherwise if you make it the right way up, then when you do the whole thing, it will basically be just a mirrored version. So that's why we're doing it backwards. So the 3 parts of foam are all cut, and I'm really happy with the shape. The next step of the process is to profile the edge. Obviously, the leading edge cannot be straight. Well, it can be, but it's not going to be very efficient. We want it to be more efficient. So what I usually do, and it worked incredibly well, I shape one side. So it's basically a radius on one side, and the top side is basically nice and straight. That aids the airflow and all that aero good stuff. Also, I shape the sides a little bit just so there is less bridging, but not a major amount. Everywhere else at the back is not very strictly essential. The fabric does go over the top, but we are not too worried about that. And another thing that I think I can claim it as I've developed it, because I haven't seen this done before with composites. Well, not on YouTube's anyways, and I do watch quite a bit of YouTube's, so most likely it has been used before. So in order for the foam, when you attach it to whatever surface you're attaching it to the underside of the car, you obviously use bolts or a combination of other fasteners. And I used to advise people to use a really large washer, but those large washers are sort of, they're protruding from the top and then they can wear out and stuff like that. So what I've done before, and I'm going to be doing on Nick's splitter, is that we're gonna introduce the spreader plates. These are, I believe, actually Nick provided them to me. I asked him to cut me the sizes he wants, and I think they are 3 or 4 mil thick aluminium. And the technique is to, because this is foam, the technique is to heat it up, and then you place it onto where the mounting point is, and it sinks in and it becomes completely flat. That way, when you drill it, you have this much of surface area or whatever size you want to use as a spreader, and you can actually drill and countersink them, because obviously this is thick aluminum plate, so you will never need to use a washer again or a large bolt or whatever, and you can have it absolutely flush. Like I said, I haven't seen this being done before on composites, on this foam, and I've done it before on Jimmy Broadband splits, and it worked really, really, really well. It's a lot of extra work, a lot of extra sort of time, because it's not just one, it's a whole stack of them. And there is a very specific temperature. Obviously, I can't really tell you the temperature because I've never measured it, but you cannot make it super too hot, because otherwise you don't want it to go all the way through. And also what you don't want to is not be hot enough and then not actually go deep enough. And also this foam stinks when you do that, because obviously it starts melting. So I highly suggest use a mask or do this outside, and I'm going to be doing this outside. Actually, maybe I'll just open the doors. So we have quite a few of this here, 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 and we have 2 large ones for the back of the diffuser. And actually, they do act as the sort of a fixing point for the foam itself, so I don't even need to glue it together. And also remember, this is the underside, because you want it on the other side, you don't want it to the top side, because this is the top side that is going to be underneath. So this is the correct way of placement. So once the splitter is done, you turn it upside down, and then obviously that's your visual part that everyone sees. And this is your underneath with those sunk in. So the next step would be, so this is how I do it. You can probably do it differently, but it worked for me before. So you heat up the plate with a butane torch or any other heat source. You can do it on the oven, gas oven, hob. Probably not going to work with a lighter, but the key with this is to get it really hot, because it just helps for it to sink in almost naturally, but not too hot for it to go too deep. It needs to be level. It's all trial and error. I kind of done a few already, so I kind of know. But also what helps with this one is that the plates that Nick cut, they actually have paint on them. So I know once this starts burning, we're basically at a good enough temperature. You will see in a second. Yep, you see this? switch this off. Obviously all the paint stopped burning, and then you have your hole, you position it over it and just drop it in. You see what I was talking about, the smell? It's nasty. And then you just press it with your pliers each corner. Don't overdo it, don't over press it, because you don't want it to go too deep. That's it. And usually once you stop applying pressure, they do not go any deeper. As you can see, well, they are pretty hot, but it's nice and flat. Next step is to profile the edge, the leading edge, like this. All done by hand. I don't use any routers or anything. All done by hand. Feel. One of these things works really well, and you just basically shape it how you want it. That's basically the base for your splitter. So once you're happy with this, the next few steps are, to be fair, fairly simple. All you have to do is pre-cut your fabrics. You choose whatever fabric you want. Mine is usually, obviously to save cost, is usually a mixture of carbon as visual layers or combination of those, and then I use biaxial e-glass layer, which I have a few different thicknesses. In essence, it's the same as carbon fiber biaxial layer. Strength is almost the same. It's slightly heavier, but it's significantly cheaper. And because it's biaxial, it means that it's the layers at 45 degrees. So when you put the normal 2x2 twill on whatever 1x1 that I've used before, with the 45, it basically all the layers are sort of crisscrossed, almost like a normal plywood, so that gives it a really nice stiff panel. So for this panel in particular, we are going strength over lightness. Even though they're still going to be fairly, well, it's still going to be fairly light. I'm going to be using 2x2 normal fabric as a visual layer. This is to match Nick's wings and a few other carbon bits. And then I am probably gonna use another layer of my spread toe carbon. So we're gonna have two of those, and then we're gonna use 600 gram biaxial layer in the middle. Then you have foam, and we're gonna repeat the same construction, but I'm not going to use this fabric because this one is most expensive that I have. This is like stabilized and the best quality. For the bottom part, which is not going to be visual, we're just going to use the normal 1x1 whatever. So it's going to have more carbon than everything else. Anyways, let's put some tape around and then lay some fabrics, and then I need to loosely pre-cut large sheets of material. First layer, cut and laid. This is the critical layer because all the other layers, you don't see them. Even the top layer, which becomes your underneath, you don't really see it. This is the only visual layer that you will always see. So it has to be pristine, basically nice and flat without any folds to the fabric itself. Obviously, race car and all that, you can get away with a lot of things, especially if you're doing something for yourself. I mean, in all honesty, on a lot of my things, I don't really care how visually it looks. In you know, to a certain degree, obviously, you don't want it to look like it's half-arsed. But, you know, certain things you can, because, you know, otherwise you'd be just going for pre-preg Formula 1 sort of quality, but that's just way too expensive. Anyways, so this layer is done. I pre-cut, as you can see, there's 3 layers of this. What I usually do, I put them on a tube, so it's a lot easier to actually apply. So because especially when it's such a large sheet like that, saves time rolling each one. So you just pre-cut each one, and now we just basically lay one after another. Simple as that. followed by the e-glass. As you can see, we have classic 2x2. Then we have the spread toe, which is 1x1 6K. Then we have this 600 gram biaxial cloth. So we have 3 layers on each side and 10 mil foam. And before I even trim the biaxial, it's time to introduce the foam right back in it, because everything would have to be trimmed, because I'm very limited with space. By limited with space, what I mean is the width of the split itself. I am limited by the board I'm using. This is a standard carpenter's board, so it's 2.44 by 1.22 board. But you have to remember that you need to leave a gap for tape, which is about 10 mil, so you're losing that. But also you need to have an overlap. So this is about 2 fingers, about an inch, what you need for overlap, because that's where the fabric sort of goes on top of each other, and that's where it gets infused and stuff. You can do it slightly differently, like I've done it before, where you fold it, but I find this way is a little neater. I made a marking, so this is where the other fabric ends. So this can actually come right here, roughly. So that's it, the entire stack is done. I'm fairly happy, and I think this one is going to be bulletproof. Just to show you, we have 2 layers of carbon, we have biaxial layer, and I actually have a strip that I cut off going all the way along there and along there, just for extra reinforcement. Then we have biaxial layer, then we have our foam, and then we have the same stack. We have biaxial layer, we have spread toe, and we have 2x2 carbon as a visual layer. This is what Nick requested, because obviously we want to match some of his other carbon panels. That's pretty much it. This can actually stay here for days undisturbed, as long as you don't move it around. But obviously I want to do it as quickly as possible. The next really crucial, because I'm doing this as an infusion, for that you need other few layers. You need to put release peel ply. This is the material that when you peel off, it gives you a nice sort of dry look. You can get away not using it, but I like to use it because it just makes everything so much easier. And then you need to have a flow media. Flow media is basically whatever is going to help the resin to go through. Such a big stack, chances are it would probably go by itself anyways, but I like to use mesh. Mesh goes on top, that's your last layer, and it basically just lets resin travel through the whole thing. And to cover everything, you need a bag, a vacuum bag. This is a polyurethane material. This one is a really large. Easy Composites have different colors. I've yet to try something else. This is sort of your budget version, and I've never really had a problem with it, but I'm willing to try different color, maybe different thickness or whatnot. And that's it. The gum, the tape is all around the perimeter already. Because it's a flat sheet, you don't strictly need any pleats. What you do need is maybe make it slightly oversized, and then in a few places, well, essentially it becomes almost like a pleat. You don't want the material to stretch. Yes, it will stretch, but if you have, for example, here I'm going to be using a roller, because we obviously want every single corner to go down really into the sharp sort of point. I don't want it to stretch, even though it can be stretched. So yeah, around basically 2 pleats somewhere, just so the material is not as tight. And yeah, you introduce vacuum to one side. I'm using a really sort of expensive but used pump, but you can use one of those Amazon or eBay jobbies or whatever. I've used it for many years before getting this massive pump, and it's fine. So this is a special line. Can't remember exactly what's it called, but basically it lets air through but does not let resin through. So that's almost like your dry brake line type stuff. The mesh stops here, so this is our kind of dry line brake anyways. And then we have multiple little bits and pieces here just so it covers the full entire range. And as the feed line, I could have gotten away with literally just having a single inlet here. I've done it before, but I just want to make sure that it gets. So this is a spiral that literally gets the whole perimeter and gets resin into here. Reason being is that I don't want to wait for it to sort of start. I want it to sort of start going because this corner is sort of not a problematic one, but because resin wants to go in a straight line as possible. So once it reaches here, and then once the resin reaches there, if it goes even, this might take much longer. So we want to give it as much feed as possible to go in a straight line. That's it. I'm very happy with this stack. All I need to do is apply the film and put it under vacuum and do a leak test. And we are the perfect vacuum, meaning there is no leaks of any sort anywhere. Fairly straightforward to calculate how much resin you need. In all honesty, I never really bother because on such large stacks, even if I calculate, because I think by my calculation this will take at least 2.5 kilograms of resin. If I mix everything at the same time, it means that it most likely will exotherm even if I use slow hardener, because it's such a large volume. So it's a lot easier to mix a liter and a half at a time and then just monitor how much of it you use and add accordingly. So for that reason, I never really calculate for those. I know that roughly from experience it will take 2.5, maybe 3 kilograms of resin. So I'll mix 1.5 now and see how far it'll take me. So let's mix it. So it started. I had to slow it down a little bit because this literally has just jumped. You need to have a correct flow because you obviously want every single layer to infuse properly. And when it goes super quick, you're risking that it will have some dry spot somewhere. So you slow it down and observe. So it's going pretty well, but I just wanted to point out, you remember the thing that I said? The reason why I want a line to go in here, because this will struggle otherwise. And even though it's going, you see this corner really doesn't want to go because all the resin wants to go in a straight line all the way there. It will get there, it will get there. Those lines, I actually had people ask me before, those lines are my visual representation just so I can see, because it's like watching paint dry, because when it's moving rather slowly, you put a line and then you can see whether it progresses past this line, so you know there is definitely progress in there. So it's just a visual aid for me. So far I have used, actually I need to add another, because I've just did another 390. So that's 2.5 kilograms. And we have just about enough. Maybe I'll need to mix a little bit more.
The next day.
Nice. So this surface is really flat and really nice. So now, gosh, it's quite a big one, isn't it? Now the time is to actually lift it and see what's underneath. You know what? I'm happy with this. It needs a bit of polish. There's a few, I won't call them dry spots. They're kind of places where you can see the texture of the thing. But in all honesty, in my books it's absolutely fine, because not only you'll be able to only see this part, but the majority of people they clear coat them and everything, and it's almost impossible to get 100% results straight away, especially if you're using this kind of surface and whatnot. But I'm happy with this.
Next morning.
So this thing is trimmed, and I already cut out the places where the diffusers are gonna go. Nick supplied me, well, sent me back the diffusers, and I already prepared them, and I probably should have done a separate video, but there is not that much of it. But this corner was broken, so I actually cut it off nice and clean. Same goes for here, and basically I put one layer underneath, forged fiber, and then a couple of layers over the top. Again, this is not supposed to be, that's another thing with carbon, you can fix it, but usually it will be still visible. You can't make it absolutely seamless because you'll never align the things, but still going to be carbon. It's going to be in one piece. It's going to be nice and strong. So once this actually dries, this is, yeah, fast hardener. I'll be able to trim it back to its original state, and we'll have brand new splitter tunnels. And there's two ways of fixing them. Actually, I can show you my old splitter tunnels. So this is from my old splitter. So there's two ways of doing it. One, you can always literally cut it and place it on top, something like this, right? And then rib nut, whatnot, a bit of adhesive. But this creates a bit of a lip here, and I know some aero guys or whoever is really deep into the aeros, they would say that this is, you know, whatever. So what I've done before once, and I'm doing unique on this one, I cut channel, a groove right in between the top layer and the foam, and then this lip, if you can see, sort of slides right inside. Once I clean it all up, it's basically the whole thing. So as you can see, I've made a channel on the inside, so this can actually slot right in like this. Beautiful. So you have very clean entry, there's no edges, nothing. And then once you fill it with sealant, this becomes almost a seamless joint. And on the back, I'll be able to fill it with a bit of forged carbon, just so it almost becomes like a single structure. I didn't film the process of this, but it's very simple. We're basically just filling all the gaps with chopped strand, which is basically just chopped off cuts. Fill it with resin as much as possible, and then thin strips just to beautify a little bit, just over the top. This is on fast hardening as well. So once this is dry, not dry, there's gonna be a little trick I will show you when the time comes. But essentially this is the finishing straight. After this, all it needs is a little bit of polish. He might have to clear coat the whole thing, but that's up to him.
Tomorrow.
Hi Nick.
Hello.
So this thing is done, and Nick came by himself to collect it because time is of the essence. You're racing in a couple of weeks?
We're testing in a couple of weeks, racing in 3, yeah.
Yeah, so he needs this for testing. So here we are.
Genuine first impressions.
Yeah. It's the top surface, I did mention in the video, I'm not 100% happy because I think the surface I'm using is a little bit warm. There's a few sort of kind of dry spots, but the main thing is that the front is polished. It's fine. At the end of the day, it's function over form.
Looks great, man.
All of this can be obviously rectified if you're willing to spend the money and time putting a clear coat over it, because remember, this is literally just carbon with whatever infused resin. There is no clear coat, nothing like that. So I personally think it's absolutely fine. I would not hesitate to run it on my car. But some people want it even more pristine, and they clear coat it and apply another kilogram of clear. This is not going to be the case with this one.
Just adding weight, aren't you?
Exactly.